The moment Olivia Edwards stepped off the stagecoach in Oatman, Arizona territory, in the summer of 1878, she knew the whispers had already started. She could feel eyes on her scarred face, see the subtle turning away of bodies, hear the hushed words that followed her like shadows. The accident 3 years ago had not only taken her family but had marked her permanently, leaving burned scars that traced down the left side of her face and neck like twisted rivers on a map. Her left hand, too, bore the evidence, the skin tight and shiny where the flames had licked her flesh. But the scars people could not see ran deeper still. The Arizona heat pressed down on her as she gathered her single trunk and looked around at the dusty streets of this mining town. Oatman was rough, the kind of place where people came to disappear or start over. She was doing both. Her aunt's last letter had promised work at the general store, a small room above it, and most importantly, a place far from St. Louis where everyone knew her story and treated her like fragile glass destined to shatter at any moment. Miss Edwards. A thin woman in her 50s approached, her face weathered by the desert sun. "I'm Martha Clemens. Your aunt asked me to meet you." Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the way Martha's gaze flickered over her scars before settling somewhere near her ear. She was used to it by now, that inability people had to look directly at damaged things. "Thank you for coming. I appreciate your kindness." Martha's lips thinned into something that might have been meant as a smile. "Your aunt speaks highly of you. The store is just down the street. I will show you the way." As they walked through town, Olivia noticed the rough buildings, the men covered in dust from the mines, the women who kept their heads down and moved quickly. Oatman was no paradise, but perhaps that was exactly what she needed. A place where survival mattered more than beauty, where everyone was too busy clawing their way toward tomorrow to judge her yesterday. The general store was a solid wooden structure with faded paint and a creaking sign. Inside, it smelled of tobacco, leather, and coffee. Her aunt, Eleanor Hart, emerged from the back room, her face breaking into a genuine smile that Olivia had not seen in far too long. "Olivia, dear girl, you made it safe." Eleanor embraced her without hesitation, without that momentary pause others always had before touching her. "Come, let me show you upstairs. You must be exhausted from the journey." The room above the store was small but clean, with a window overlooking the street and the mountains beyond. Those mountains rose up like ancient sentinels, purple and brown in the distance, promising mystery and solitude. "It is not much," Eleanor said, setting the trunk down. "It is perfect," Olivia replied, meaning it. "Thank you for this opportunity, Aunt Eleanor. I will work hard, I promise." "I know you will, dear, but promise me something else too. Promise me you will try to live again, not just exist." Olivia looked away toward those distant mountains. "People do not want someone like me. They have made that clear. People are fools." Eleanor's voice was firm. "The right person will see you, truly see you, not just your scars." Olivia had stopped believing in right persons or fairy tale endings. She had learned that lesson in the most brutal way possible. But she nodded to make her aunt happy, to close this conversation before it could cut too deep. The first week passed in a blur of learning the store's inventory, meeting suppliers, and enduring the stares of customers. Some were merely curious, others openly repulsed. She heard the whispers clearly enough. "Poor thing. What a shame. Who would want her now?" Each comment was a needle prick she felt but refused to acknowledge outwardly. Then there were the men who thought damaged meant desperate. Men who propositioned her with crude words and cruder gestures, as if her scars meant she should be grateful for any attention at all. She turned them all away with a quiet dignity that seemed to confuse them. It was on a Tuesday morning, 8 days after her arrival, that Samuel Pierce first walked into the general store, and Olivia's carefully ordered world tilted on its axis. He had to duck through the doorway, his frame too large for ordinary spaces. He stood at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders that seemed carved from the very mountains he lived in. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord. His jaw was shadowed with several days of beard growth, and his eyes were a startling gray-green that reminded her of storm clouds over forests. He wore buckskin trousers, a homespun shirt that stretched across his chest, and carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was and had no need to prove it. Olivia stood behind the counter, her damaged hand instinctively moving to hide behind her skirt as those unusual eyes swept the store before landing on her. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Not at her scars, not with pity or disgust or inappropriate interest, but at her. His gaze met hers directly, and she felt something inside her chest crack open just slightly. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and rough like stones tumbling in a river. "I need supplies. Got a list here." He approached the counter and set down a piece of paper covered in surprisingly neat handwriting. Olivia took the list, her fingers trembling slightly as she read through the items. Flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, salt pork, beans, and various other staples. "This will take me a few minutes to gather everything," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "No rush. I have got time." As she moved through the store collecting items, she felt his presence like heat from a fire. He did not follow her or hover, but she was intensely aware of him examining tools along the far wall, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he picked up items and evaluated their quality. "You are new in town," he said after a while. It was not a question. "I arrived last week." "I am Elinor's niece." "Elinor is good people," he paused. "I am Samuel Pierce. I live up in the mountains about 2 hours' ride north. I come down once a month for supplies. Olivia Edwards." She placed a sack of flour on the counter, then went back for the other items. "What brings you to Oatman, Miss Edwards?" She glanced at him, surprised by the question. Most people either knew her story from gossip or did not care enough to ask. "A fresh start," she said carefully. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Good place for it." People here are too busy with their own troubles to dwell much on others. When she had finished gathering everything, the pile on the counter was substantial. Samuel pulled out a leather pouch and counted out payment with careful precision, then hefted the supplies with an ease that suggested the significant weight was nothing to him. "I appreciate your help, Miss Edwards." His eyes met hers again, and this time she saw something in them she could not quite name. Respect, maybe, or simple human recognition. "You are welcome, Mr. Pierce. Safe travels." He paused at the door, his large frame silhouetted against the bright Arizona sun outside. "I will see you next month," he said, and then he was gone. Olivia stood at the counter for a long moment, her heart beating strangely fast, before Elinor emerged from the back room with a knowing smile. "Samuel Pierce is a good man," her aunt said. "Been up in those mountains for 5 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is decent through and through." "Why does he live alone up there?" Elinor's smile faded slightly. "He has his own scars, dear. Not all of them show on the outside." The words stayed with Olivia through the rest of the day and into the evening. As she lay in her small bed that night, looking out at the stars scattered across the dark sky, she thought about storm-gray eyes that had looked at her without flinching, without judgment, without pity. She thought about large hands that could be gentle with tools and probably with other things too. She thought about a voice like stones in a river saying, "I will see you next month," as if it was a promise. She fell asleep thinking about mountains and the men who lived in them. The next weeks passed with the rhythm of work and routine. Olivia grew more confident in her role at the store, learned the names of regular customers, and began to feel the first tentative threads of belonging. Eleanor was patient and kind, teaching her not just about inventory and accounts, but about the people of Oatman and their stories. There was Michael Davies, the banker who had lost his wife to cholera and now lived a half-life of routine and regret. There was Sarah Canton, the schoolteacher who wanted desperately to escape back to Boston but had no money for the journey. There was the whole collection of miners, each with their dreams of striking it rich, and the saloon girls who served those dreams with painted smiles and empty eyes. Everyone had a story. Everyone carried something heavy. Olivia began to understand that her scars were not unique in their ability to mark a person. They were simply more visible than most. But despite her growing comfort in the town, she found herself thinking often of Samuel Pierce. She caught herself watching the door on Tuesdays, even though she knew his once-a-month schedule meant she should not expect him yet. She wondered about his life in the mountains, what his days looked like, why he had chosen solitude over society. It was Eleanor who told her more pieces of his story one evening as they closed up the store. "Samuel came here after the war," Eleanor said, measuring out thread for a customer's order the next day. "He fought for the Union, saw terrible things, lost his whole unit in a battle down in Georgia. He was the only survivor, and I think he carries that weight like Atlas carrying the world." Olivia's hand stilled on the broom she was using. "He blames himself. Most survivors do they not? Fair or not, they carry guilt for still drawing breath when others do not." Eleanor looked at her meaningfully. "You would know something about that." The words were gentle but accurate. Olivia had spent 3 years drowning in survivor's guilt, wondering why she had lived when her parents and younger brother had perished in the fire that destroyed their home. She had been 20 then, old enough to feel she should have done more, saved them, died with them instead of escaping with burns and broken memories. "Yes," she said quietly, "I would know." "Maybe that is why he looked at you the way he did," Eleanor mused. "Recognized a fellow traveler on a hard road. He barely looked at me at all. Oh, child, he looked at you plenty, and more importantly, he saw you. There is a difference." Olivia wanted to dismiss her aunt's words as wishful thinking, but they planted themselves in her heart like seeds waiting for water. When Samuel Pierce returned exactly 1 month later, Olivia's hands went damp with nervous perspiration. She had told herself she was being foolish, building castles from a single brief interaction. But when he walked through the door and his eyes found hers immediately, when his weathered face softened into something that might have been a smile, her heart gave a traitorous leap. "Miss Edwards," he said, approaching the counter. "Good to see you again. Mr. Pierce, same as last month, more or less. I added a few things." He handed her another neatly written list. As she gathered his supplies, she found courage from somewhere deep inside. "How are things in the mountains?" "Peaceful. I've got a good setup up there, cabin, garden, some chickens. Hunt most of my meat. It is a good life." "It sounds lonely." He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes lonely is safer than the alternative. She understood that sentiment deep in her bones. She placed a tin of coffee on the counter, then surprised herself by asking, "What made you choose the mountains?" Samuel leaned against the counter, his muscled arms crossing over his chest. "After the war, I could not stomach crowds anymore. Too many voices, too much noise. Up there, it is just wind and trees and the occasional elk. Nobody expecting anything from me, nobody looking at me like I am supposed to be someone I am not anymore." "Yes," Olivia breathed. "That feeling exactly." His gray-green eyes studied her face, and she forced herself not to turn away, not to hide her scars. Let him look. Let him see the damage and decide if he could stomach it. You ran from something too, he said softly. From everything. From who I was, from who people expected me to be, from their pity and their whispers and their certainty that I am too broken to be worth knowing. People are fools. The words echoed what a leaner had said, but coming from Samuel they carried a different weight. Broken things do not need to be thrown away. Sometimes broken things fit together best. The air between them felt charged, alive with possibility. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. You believe that? She asked. I am starting to. He held her gaze for another moment, then straightened. Would you like to see the mountains sometime, Miss Edwards? I promise I am a gentleman. I could show you where I live, let you see what peace looks like. Every sensible part of her brain screamed caution. She barely knew this man. Going into the mountains with him was the definition of reckless. But something deeper than sense, something that lived in the cracked open place inside her chest, whispered yes. I would like that, she said. Next Sunday, I will bring an extra horse. We can ride up in the morning and I will have you back before dark. Eleanor can vouch for my character if you want to ask her. I trust my aunt's judgment, and my own. Sunday would be lovely. This time his smile was unmistakable, transforming his rugged face into something that made her stomach flutter. Sunday, then. After he left, Eleanor appeared with a grin that could have lit up all of Oatman. Did I just hear what I think I heard? I am going riding in the mountains. It is just a friendly outing. Oh, dear child, there is nothing just friendly about the way that man looks at you. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she could not stop her own smile. Do not make more of this than it is. I am making exactly what it is. That man has not invited another soul to see his mountain sanctuary in 5 years. Trust me, this is significant. The days until Sunday stretched out like taffy, each hour longer than the last. Olivia found herself nervous and excited in equal measure, a combination of feelings she had not experienced since before the fire. She borrowed a split riding skirt from Eleanor and spent more time than she wanted to admit trying to style her hair in a way that covered the worst of her neck scars, before giving up and leaving it in a simple braid down her back. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Samuel arrived at the store exactly at 8 o'clock, leading 2 horses. One was a large roan gelding that suited his size, and the other was a smaller bay mare with gentle eyes. This is Rosie, Samuel said, stroking the mare's neck. She has got the sweetest temperament of any horse I have ever known. She will take good care of you. Olivia approached carefully, letting Rosie sniff her hand before petting her soft nose. Hello, beautiful girl. Samuel helped her mount, his strong hands on her waist sending electricity through her entire body. Once she was settled in the saddle, he swung onto his own horse with practiced ease, and they set off toward the mountains at a comfortable walk. The morning air was already warm but not yet oppressive. They rode through Oatman and out the other side, following a trail that wound gradually upward. As they climbed, the landscape changed. The flat desert gave way to rocky inclines dotted with sage and mesquite. Higher still, juniper trees appeared and the air grew slightly cooler. How long have you been up here? Olivia asked, breaking their comfortable silence. 5 years this September. I bought the land with my army pay and some money my father left me. Built the cabin myself, 1 log at a time. That must have been hard work. It was exactly what I needed. Physical labor that ended each day with something real, something I could point to and say I did that. After the war, I needed to build things instead of destroying them. She understood that too, the need to create meaning from chaos. What was the war like? She felt him tense in the saddle beside her. For a long moment he did not answer and she worried she had pushed too far too soon. It was hell, he said finally, and I do not mean that lightly. I watched boys younger than me die in ways no one should die. I killed men who probably had families waiting for them. I saw humanity at its absolute worst, and the battle where I lost my unit. He paused, his jaw working. We walked into an ambush. I was scouting ahead, which is the only reason I survived. By the time I got back to warn them, it was too late. I watched every single man I had fought beside for 2 years get cut down in a hail of bullets. I could not save any of them. I am so sorry, Olivia said softly. The guilt was crushing me. Still does some days. I came out here because I could not face another person who wanted to call me a hero when I felt like a failure. Up in these mountains, I do not have to pretend to be whole. I know exactly what you mean. After the fire that killed my family, everyone treated me like I was glass. They said I was too damaged to recover, too broken to ever have a normal life. Some said it to my face. Others just thought it loud enough for me to hear. They made me feel like I had died in that fire too, like the scars on my skin went all the way through me and turned me into something less than human. Samuel pulled his horse to a stop, and she did the same. He turned in his saddle to face her fully, his gray-green eyes intense. You are not less than human, Olivia. You are someone who survived something terrible and kept going. That takes more strength than most people ever have to find. Those scars are not marks of brokenness. They are proof you are a fighter. Tears stung her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. People do not usually see it that way. People are usually too comfortable in their own skins to understand what it takes to survive in a damaged one. He reached across the space between their horses and gently touched her scarred hand where it rested on the saddle horn. His fingers were warm and calloused, and the touch was so tender it made her chest ache. I see you, Olivia. Not just the scars, not just the pain, but you, the strength and courage and kindness that lives underneath all of it. A tear escaped despite her best efforts. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then everyone you have known before now has been blind. His thumb stroked across her damaged knuckles, the gesture achingly gentle. Broken things fit together best, remember. Maybe we can help each other learn how to be broken and whole at the same time. I would like that, she whispered. They sat there for a long moment, hands touching, hearts opening before Samuel smiled and said, "Come on. I want to show you my favorite place in the world." They rode higher into the mountains, following trails that Samuel clearly knew by heart. The landscape grew even more beautiful, with pine trees adding their sharp scent to the air and birds calling from hidden branches. They saw a deer that bounded away at their approach, white tail flashing like a flag. Finally, they crested a rise and Samuel stopped. "There," he said, pointing. Below them, nestled in a small valley between peaks, was the most charming cabin Olivia had ever seen. It was built from solid logs, with a stone chimney and a covered porch across the front. Behind it was a small barn and a chicken coop. A garden bursting with vegetables spread out on one side, and a clear stream ran nearby, its water sparkling in the sunlight. "Samuel, it is beautiful," Olivia breathed. "It is home." There was pride in his voice, but also contentment. "Come on, I will show you around." They rode down to the cabin and Samuel helped her dismount. His hands lingered on her waist just a moment longer than necessary, and she found she did not mind at all. The cabin's interior was as impressive as its exterior. One large room served as kitchen, dining, and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A loft above held what she assumed was his sleeping area. Everything was neat and well crafted, from the sturdy furniture to the shelves lined with books. "You have books," she said, surprised and delighted. "Reading is one of the few entertainments I have got up here." I order them from a catalog out of Denver. He gestured to the shelves. Feel free to look through them if you want. While she examined his collection, which ranged from philosophy to poetry to adventure novels, Samuel busied himself making coffee. She heard him moving around the kitchen area with quiet competence, and the domesticity of the moment made something warm unfurl in her belly. "You get lonely up here?" she asked, running her fingers along the spines of the books. "I did not think I did," he said slowly. "I convinced myself that solitude was what I wanted, what I needed. But lately, I am starting to realize there is a difference between healing alone and hiding alone. I have been doing the latter." She turned to face him. "What changed?" His eyes met hers across the room. "You walked into the general store, and for the first time in 5 years, I found myself wanting to be around another person. Not just wanting it, but craving it. I went back to my mountain that day and realized how empty it felt without someone to share it with." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Samuel, I know it is fast, I know we barely know each other, but there is something here, Olivia. I felt it the moment I saw you, and I think you felt it too. Am I wrong?" "No." The word came out barely a whisper. "You are not wrong." He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stood before her, tall and broad and solid, and raised one hand to gently cup her scarred cheek. She held her breath, waiting for him to recoil, but his touch remained steady and warm. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes." His lips met hers with a gentleness that made her knees weak. The kiss was soft, questioning, asking permission with every slight movement. She melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel the solid beat of his heart. He deepened the kiss slightly, one arm wrapping around her waist to pull her closer, and she felt something inside her bloom like a flower after rain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the day we met," he admitted. "I have been hoping you would," she replied. They spent the rest of the day exploring his mountain home. He showed her the garden where he grew tomatoes, beans, squash, and herbs. He introduced her to his chickens, each of which apparently had a name and distinct personality. They walked along the stream, and he pointed out tracks from the animals that came to drink there. He showed her his workshop in the barn where he carved furniture and tools during the long winter months. With every moment, Olivia felt herself falling deeper under his spell. Samuel was patient and kind, strong yet gentle. He listened when she talked and shared his own thoughts freely. He did not treat her like she was fragile or damaged. He treated her like she was precious. They ate lunch on his porch, simple fare of bread and cheese and dried apples, but it tasted like a feast because of the company. Olivia found herself laughing at his stories about stubborn chickens and a raccoon that kept trying to steal from his garden. The sound of her own laughter startled her. How long had it been since she had laughed like this, free and genuine? "You should laugh more," Samuel said, watching her with warm eyes. "It lights up your whole face." "I have not had much to laugh about in recent years." "Then I will make it my mission to give you reasons." He said it simply, like a vow. As afternoon stretched toward evening, they reluctantly prepared to head back down the mountain. Samuel saddled the horses while Olivia took one last look at the cabin, already memorizing every detail. "You will come back," Samuel said, reading her expression. "Any Sunday you want, you are welcome here, or any other day for that matter. This place is yours as much as mine now." The words were heavy with implication, with promise, with hope. She turned to him and smiled. "I will come back, as often as you will have me. Then I will see you next Sunday. And the Sunday after that, and the one after that." He helped her onto Rosie, his hands strong and sure. "You have become important to me very quickly, Olivia Edwards. I hope that does not frighten you." "It does," she admitted, "but in a good way, a way that makes me feel alive again." The ride back to Oatman was slower than the morning journey, neither of them eager for the day to end. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's favorite foods and least favorite chores and the books that had changed their lives. By the time they reached the general store, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, and Olivia felt like a different woman than the one who had ridden out that morning. Samuel helped her down from the horse, and this time she slid slowly through his arms until her feet touched the ground. They stood close enough that she could feel his warmth, see the flecks of green in his gray eyes. "Thank you for today," she said, "for seeing me, for sharing your sanctuary with me. Thank you for wanting to see it, for being brave enough to take a chance on a scarred mountain man with too much baggage." "I think our baggage fits together," she said, echoing his earlier words. He kissed her again, right there on the street where anyone could see, and she did not care who might be watching or what they might say. Let them talk. Let them judge. For the first time since the fire, she felt like she was living instead of just existing. When he finally pulled away, he looked reluctant. "I will see you in a week," she agreed. He mounted his horse and rode away into the gathering darkness, and Olivia stood watching until he disappeared from sight. Behind her, she heard the door to the store open. "Well," Eleanor said, not even trying to hide her pleased smile, "that looked like a successful day. Aunt Eleanor, I think I am falling in love with him. Good. It is about time both of you let yourselves feel something other than pain." The following week passed in a daze of anticipation. Olivia moved through her days at the store with a lightness she had not felt in years. Customers noticed the change in her, the way she smiled more readily, the softness that had crept into her expression. Some warmed to her in response. Others, particularly the women who had whispered about her being too broken to love, seemed almost offended by her happiness. Sarah Canton, the schoolteacher, came into the store on Wednesday afternoon and gave Olivia a long, appraising look. "I hear you have been spending time with Samuel Pierce," Sarah said, her tone carrying just the faintest edge of disapproval. "I have," Olivia replied, refusing to elaborate. "He is quite isolated up in those mountains. Some say strange. A woman ought to be careful about the company she keeps." Eleanor appeared from the back room like a guardian angel. "Samuel Pierce is one of the finest men in this territory. If you are implying otherwise, Sarah Canton, you can take your opinions and your business elsewhere." Sarah's cheeks flushed. "I meant no offense. I was only concerned." "Your concern is neither needed nor wanted. Olivia is perfectly capable of making her own decisions about who she spends time with." After Sarah left in a huff, Eleanor turned to Olivia with fire in her eyes. "Do not let small-minded people make you doubt what your heart knows is true." "I will not," Olivia promised. "Samuel is the best man I have ever known. What we have might be new, but it is real." "I know, dear. Anyone with eyes can see that." Sunday came around again, and this time Olivia was ready and waiting when Samuel arrived. They rode up the mountain with comfortable ease, their conversation flowing naturally. Over the next few months, this became their routine. Every Sunday, Samuel would collect Olivia and they would spend the day at his cabin. She learned to help him in the garden, getting her hands dirty in the rich soil. He taught her to fish in the stream, standing behind her to guide her hands on the pole, his chest warm against her back. She helped him gather eggs from his chickens and laughed when one particularly aggressive hen pecked at his hand. He read poetry to her in the evenings before they had to ride back, his deep voice giving new life to words on a page. With each passing week, they grew closer. Touches became more frequent and lingering. Kisses deepened with passion. Conversations grew more intimate, covering dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Olivia felt herself healing in ways she had not thought possible. The nightmares that had plagued her since the fire came less frequently. The instinct to hide her scars faded when she was with Samuel, who touched them as tenderly as he touched the unmarred parts of her. One Sunday, in late September, 4 months after their first meeting, Samuel seemed nervous. They had finished lunch and were sitting on his porch, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. "Olivia," he began, then stopped. His large hands fidgeted with the edge of his shirt, and she realized with surprise that this strong, confident man was actually anxious. "What is it?" she asked gently, placing her hand over his. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. When I am with you, I do not feel like a broken shell of the man I used to be. I feel whole. You make me whole," her breath caught. "Samuel, you make me feel the same way." "I know this is fast. I know there are people who would say we should wait longer, be more practical. But I have spent 5 years being cautious and isolated, and I am tired of wasting time on fear." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia Edwards, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you laugh at my stupid jokes and the way you are not afraid to get dirt under your fingernails. I love that you see past my scars to who I really am, and I hope I do the same for you. Will you marry me? Will you come live with me on this mountain and build a life together?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face, but for once they were tears of pure joy. "Yes. Yes, Samuel, I will marry you. I love you too. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, and she heard the rapid pounding of his heart matching her own. When he kissed her, it was with a passion and promise that left her breathless. "I do not have a ring yet," he said when they finally broke apart. "I will need to go into town, order one. I do not need a ring, I just need you. You will have both. You will have everything I can give you and more." His expression grew serious. "I know my life up here is not easy. The winters are hard and it gets lonely. But I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Your life up here is exactly what I want. Peace, beauty, and you. That is all I need." They rode back to town that evening as an engaged couple, and Alina cried happy tears when they told her the news. She immediately began planning a wedding, insisting it should be in Oatman's small church with the whole town invited. "People need to see that love wins," Alina said firmly. "They need to see that their small-minded judgments mean nothing in the face of real connection. You two deserve to celebrate your love publicly, not hide it away like something shameful." The wedding was set for the third Sunday in October. Alina threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm, and Olivia found herself caught up in the excitement despite her natural inclination toward privacy. She ordered a simple but lovely dress from a catalog, cream-colored silk that did not require her to hide her scars. Samuel came to town more frequently than usual, taking care of various arrangements and clearly eager to have the day arrive. But not everyone in Oatman was happy about the upcoming nuptials. The whispers that had followed Olivia since her arrival grew louder and more malicious. She heard snatches of conversation, women wondering aloud what Samuel Pierce could possibly see in someone so damaged, speculating that he must be desperate or disturbed himself. One afternoon, about a week before the wedding, Sarah Canton came into the store with 2 other women. Olivia was alone, Alina having gone to the bank. "Miss Edwards," Sarah said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we wanted to speak with you. As women of this community, we feel it is our Christian duty to counsel you." Olivia's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice level. "About what?" "About this marriage you are rushing into. Samuel Pierce is a good man, but he is also deeply troubled. He lives like a hermit, isolated from decent society. And you, well, Sarah's gaze flickered over Olivia's scars with barely concealed distaste. You have your own troubles. Two broken people do not make a whole relationship. You will only bring each other down. One of the other women, a pinch-faced matron named Judith, nodded. It is cruel, really. You are trapping that poor man into a marriage with someone who can never give him the normal life he deserves. And what about children? How could you be a proper mother, marked as you are? The words landed like physical blows, each one finding the soft, vulnerable places inside Olivia where her own insecurities lived. For a moment, doubt flooded through her. What if they were right? What if she was being selfish, dragging Samuel into a marriage he would come to regret? But then she thought about Samuel's hands, gentle on her scars. She thought about the way he looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She thought about his words, broken things fit together best, and she felt her spine straighten with renewed resolve. I appreciate your concern, Olivia said, her voice cold as mountain snow. But you are mistaken. Samuel and I do not bring each other down. We lift each other up. We understand each other in ways comfortable, unmarked people like you never could. And as for children, I will be exactly the mother they need. Someone who knows that beauty is not just what shows on the surface. That strength comes from surviving, that love matters more than appearances. Now, if there is nothing else, I believe you should leave. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You will regret this marriage, mark my words. And when Samuel Pierce realizes what he has gotten himself into, you will have no one to blame but yourself. Get out. Eleanor's voice rang through the store like a gunshot. She stood in the doorway, eyes blazing with fury. Get out of my store and do not come back until you can behave like decent human beings. The three women scurried out, and Eleanor immediately went to Olivia, pulling her into a fierce hug. Do not let them poison your happiness, Eleanor said. They are small people with smaller hearts. Samuel loves you, you love him. That is all that matters. Olivia clung to her aunt, fighting back tears of anger and hurt. Why do they care so much? Why can they not just let us be happy? Because your happiness threatens them. It shows them that their narrow view of the world is wrong, that love can flourish in places they never imagined. That terrifies people who need everything to fit into neat little boxes. That evening, Samuel came to town unexpectedly. He found Olivia in her room above the store, and one look at his face told her he had heard about the confrontation. Eleanor told me what happened, he said, gathering her into his arms. Are you all right? I am fine. Angry, but fine. I am sorry you had to deal with that. If I had been there, I would have thrown those women out myself. His arms tightened around her. Are you having doubts about us, about the wedding? If you are, we can wait. I will wait as long as you need. Olivia pulled back enough to look into his eyes. Samuel Pierce, I am not having doubts. Not about you, not about us, not about our future. Those women were cruel and small-minded, but they did not shake my faith in what we have. If anything, they strengthened it. I know what we have is real and worth fighting for. Relief washed over his features. I love you, Olivia. More than I have words to express. I love you too. One more week and I will be your wife. One more week, he agreed, kissing her softly. And then forever. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and pleasant weather. Eleanor had decorated the small church with wildflowers from the mountains, and a surprising number of townspeople attended. Olivia suspected many came out of curiosity rather than goodwill, but she found she did not care. Let them watch. Let them see what real love looked like. She walked down the aisle in her cream silk dress, her head high despite the whispers she could hear. Her scars were visible, uncovered, and she refused to be ashamed of them. When she reached the front of the church and saw Samuel waiting for her, everything else faded away. He looked magnificent in a new suit. his long hair tied back neatly, his gray-green eyes fixed on her with such intensity she forgot to breathe. As she took her place beside him, he reached for her scarred hand and held it tenderly. The preacher, a kind older man named Reverend Matthews, began the ceremony. His words about love and commitment and partnership seemed to carry extra weight as he looked at Samuel and Olivia. "Marriage is not about perfection," Reverend Matthews said. "It is about two imperfect people choosing each other every day, supporting each other through trials, celebrating each other's victories. It is about seeing past the surface to the heart beneath. Samuel and Olivia have found that in each other, and it is a beautiful thing to witness." When it came time for vows, Samuel spoke first, his deep voice carrying through the church. "Olivia, before I met you, I was existing but not living. I had convinced myself that isolation was the same as peace, that avoiding pain was the same as healing. You showed me I was wrong. You taught me that sharing your life with someone who truly sees you is not a weakness but a strength. I vow to love you every day, to honor your courage, to protect your heart as fiercely as you have captured mine. I vow to build a life with you full of laughter and joy and purpose. I vow to always see you, truly see you, for the remarkable woman you are." Olivia's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. "Samuel, you gave me back my life. You looked at me and saw not damage but strength, not brokenness but beauty. You made me believe I deserved love, deserved happiness, deserved a future. I vow to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams, to share your burdens. I vow to make our mountain home a place of warmth and joy. I vow to love you with every part of me, scarred and whole, for as long as I draw breath." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the church actually wiped away tears. Even some of the women who had whispered cruelty looked grudgingly moved by the obvious love between the couple. The reception was held at the church hall, and while it was modest, it felt perfect. Eleanor had baked a cake, and there was music and dancing. Samuel led Olivia onto the dance floor, his large hand gentle on her waist, and they swayed together while the whole town watched. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Pierce?" he murmured in her ear. "Like coming home," she whispered back. They left the reception as the sun was setting, riding up to their mountain home by the light of a full moon. The night was magical, cool and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. When they arrived at the cabin, Samuel dismounted and then lifted Olivia down, cradling her in his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my wife over the threshold, as is proper." He pushed open the cabin door with his shoulder and carried her inside. The cabin was transformed. Candles glowed on every surface, casting warm light throughout the space. Fresh flowers, probably gathered by Samuel that morning, filled vases on the table and shelves. The bed in the loft above was made up with new linens that Olivia recognized from the store's finest stock. "Samuel, this is beautiful," she breathed. "Not as beautiful as you." He set her down gently, his hands moving to cup her face. "Are you nervous?" "A little," she admitted. "But mostly I am just happy. So happy I almost do not believe this is real." "It is real. We are real. And we have the rest of our lives to prove it." He kissed her softly, then deeper, and she melted into his embrace. Their wedding night was everything it should be, tender and passionate, filled with gentle discoveries and whispered words of love. Samuel treated her like she was precious, his touch reverent on both her scars and her smooth skin. And when they finally lay together afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Olivia felt more whole than she ever had in her life. "I love you, Mrs. Pierce," Samuel whispered into her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Pierce. Forever." The first months of their marriage were an adjustment as they learned to share space and synchronize their lives. Olivia moved all her belongings up to the cabin, and Alina, though sad to lose her daily company, was thrilled to see her so happy. Winter came to the mountains, and Olivia discovered that Samuel had been right about it being harsh. Snow piled deep, and temperatures dropped below freezing. But the cabin was cozy and well built, and she found she did not mind being snowed in with her husband. They spent long evenings reading by the fire, Samuel often pulling her into his lap so they could share a book. They cooked together, learning each other's preferences and laughing when meals went wrong. They talked for hours, sharing memories and dreams and all the small details that build intimacy. Samuel taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance and aim until she could hit a target reliably. It was practical in the mountains, but it also made her feel capable and strong. She taught him to bake bread the way her mother had taught her, and the first time he pulled a perfect golden loaf from the oven, his proud grin made her heart swell. Physical intimacy between them deepened too. The initial shyness faded, replaced by comfortable passion and playful exploration. Samuel never tired of telling her she was beautiful, of touching her scars with reverence, of making her feel desired in ways she had never imagined possible. And she learned his body with equal devotion, memorizing what made him sigh, what made him laugh, what drove him wild with need. By spring, they had settled into a rhythm of domestic happiness that felt natural and right. The garden needed planting, and they worked side by side in the warming sun, their hands dirty and their hearts light. Samuel built her a small greenhouse so she could start seedlings earlier and extend the growing season. She sewed curtains for the windows and embroidered pillowcases with their initials. They went to town together once a month for supplies and to visit Alina. The townspeople had gradually accepted their marriage, most people coming around to the idea that Samuel and Olivia were genuinely happy together. Even Sarah Canton had softened, if only slightly, offering Olivia a stiff but civil greeting when they crossed paths. But it was in their mountain sanctuary that they were truly themselves. No judgments, no expectations, just two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from their shared brokenness. One evening in late May, almost a year after they had first met, Olivia realized her monthly courses were late. Very late. She waited another week before saying anything, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed. But as the symptoms continued, nausea in the mornings and a strange exhaustion that hit her in the afternoons, she could no longer deny the possibility. She told Samuel one night after dinner, the two of them sitting on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly. Samuel's head whipped toward her, his eyes wide. "Truly, I cannot be certain yet, but all the signs point to it. My courses are 3 weeks late, and I have been feeling odd." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it with pure joy. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "How do you feel about it? Are you happy? Scared?" "Both," she admitted. "I am thrilled, but also terrified. What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong? You will be an amazing mother. You are strong and patient and full of love, and nothing is going to go wrong. We will take care of each other and this baby, and it will be perfect." "Not perfect," she corrected gently, "but ours. And that is better than perfect." They rode down to town the next day so Olivia could see the doctor, an older man named Dr. Sutton who had practiced medicine for 40 years. He confirmed what Olivia had suspected. She was indeed pregnant, about 2 months along, and as far as he could tell, everything looked healthy and normal. "Your scars should not cause any problems with the pregnancy or delivery," Dr. Sutton assured her. The scarring is on your face and hand, not anywhere that would affect childbearing. You are a strong young woman. I expect you will do just fine." Alina cried when they told her she would be a great aunt. She immediately began knitting baby clothes, her needles clicking away with joyful purpose. Over the following months, as Olivia's belly grew round with their child, Alina knitted blankets and booties and tiny sweaters in various colors, since they had no way of knowing if the baby would be a boy or girl. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though the summer heat made Olivia uncomfortable, and the mountain trails became harder to navigate as her center of gravity shifted. Samuel was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, hovering anxiously whenever she lifted anything heavier than a teacup. "I am pregnant, not dying," she laughed one day when he rushed to help her carry a basket of laundry. "I know, but I want to take care of you. Let me do this." His concern was endearing even when it bordered on excessive, and she learned to accept his help gracefully, knowing it came from a place of deep love. As autumn arrived and the leaves turned gold and red in the mountains, Olivia's due date approached. Dr. Sutton had given them a range in late October or early November. Samuel brought Alina up to the cabin 2 weeks before the earliest date, wanting to make sure Olivia had another woman present for the birth. Alina set up in the cabin's main room, bringing supplies and preparing for the blessed event. The labor began on a chilly morning in the last week of October. Olivia woke to cramping pains that quickly intensified into contractions. Samuel went pale when she told him, but he gathered himself quickly, helping her into the rocking chair he had built specifically for this purpose, and sending for Dr. Sutton. The labor was long and difficult. Hours passed with Olivia walking, rocking, breathing through contractions that felt like they might split her in two. Samuel stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, his face etched with worry every time she cried out in pain. "I am so sorry," he kept saying. "I am so sorry you have to go through this." "It is worth it," she gasped between contractions. "Our baby will be worth all of this." As night fell and the contractions grew closer together, Dr. Sutton finally announced it was time to push. Olivia bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed, Samuel supporting her back and Alina coaching her through each push. Just when she thought she could not possibly continue, when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she felt a final searing pressure and release. A baby's cry filled the cabin, strong and lusty, and Olivia collapsed back against Samuel with relief and joy. "You have a son," Dr. Sutton announced, holding up a squalling, red-faced infant. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Samuel was crying, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he looked at their child. Alina quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in one of her knitted blankets before placing him in Olivia's arms. Olivia looked down at her son and felt love so fierce it stole her breath. He was perfect, with a thick shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be gray-green like his father's. His tiny fists waved in the air as he cried, and she brought him to her breast instinctively. He latched on immediately, and blessed quiet settled over the cabin. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, his large finger gently stroking their son's tiny hand. The baby's fist immediately wrapped around Samuel's finger, and the look on her husband's face made Olivia fall in love with him all over again. "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Samuel said, "Thomas, after my father. Thomas Benjamin Pierce, if that pleases you. It is perfect." Olivia looked up at her husband. "Thank you. For what?" "For giving me this. For giving me hope and love and now this beautiful child. For seeing past my scars to who I really am. for proving that broken things really do fit together best." Samuel leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more. You gave me a reason to come down from this mountain and live again." Little Thomas Pierce became the center of their world. The tiny cabin rang with his cries and gurgles and eventually his laughter. Olivia discovered that motherhood came naturally to her despite her earlier fears. She nursed Thomas, changed him, soothed him through fussy evenings, and marveled at every small change in his developing personality. Samuel was a devoted father, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he cradled his son against his broad chest. He would walk the floor with Thomas for hours if needed, singing old songs in his deep, rumbling voice. He built a cradle that rocked smoothly and carved small toys for when Thomas would be old enough to play with them. Eleanor visited frequently, unable to stay away from her great-nephew for long. She brought supplies and gossip from town and endless knitted items. The small cabin overflowed with baby clothes and blankets, all made with love by Eleanor's skilled hands. Winter came again, and this time being snowed and meant different things. Sleepless nights soothing a fussy baby. Learning to work around feeding and changing schedules. Finding moments of intimacy when Thomas napped. But even in the exhaustion and chaos that a baby brought, Olivia and Samuel's love continued to deepen. One evening when Thomas was about 4 months old, Olivia stood at the cabin window watching snow fall softly outside. Behind her, Samuel sat in the rocking chair with their son asleep against his chest, both of them dozing. She looked at this scene, at the life they had built together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. 2 years ago, she had been broken, convinced she would never deserve love or happiness. She had believed the whispers that she was too damaged to be wanted. But Samuel had proven all of that wrong. He had seen her scars and loved her anyway. He had shown her that brokenness was not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. She thought about the night he had said broken things fit together best, and she knew now with absolute certainty that he had been right. They had taken their individual pain and trauma and somehow forged something beautiful and whole. Their love had not erased their scars, but it had given those scars new meaning. They were no longer marks of damage, but proof of survival, evidence that they had endured and overcome. The years passed in the mountains with a rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Olivia became pregnant again, and this time she welcomed the pregnancy with confidence rather than fear. She knew what to expect, and she had survived it once. Their daughter was born on a warm spring morning, the birth quicker and easier than Thomas's had been. They named her Rosalina Pierce, after Samuel's mother and Olivia's aunt. Rose had her mother's dark hair and her father's strong build, and from the moment she entered the world, she had a fierce, independent streak that made both parents laugh. The cabin grew crowded with 2 children, so Samuel spent a summer building an addition, expanding their home to include another bedroom and a larger kitchen. Olivia planted an even bigger garden to feed their growing family. Eleanor continued to visit regularly, delighting in her role as great aunt and honorary grandmother. Thomas started lessons with his mother, learning to read and write and do arithmetic. He also learned mountain skills from his father, how to track animals, how to fish, how to identify edible plants. Rose toddled after her older brother, determined to do everything he did despite being smaller and younger. The family made monthly trips to town for supplies and to maintain their connection with the outside world. Thomas and Rose caused quite a stir in Oatman, both children confident and friendly, clearly thriving in their mountain home. The townspeople who had once whispered about Olivia being too broken to be loved could not help but see the evidence that they had been wrong. She was not broken. She was strong, capable, and loved beyond measure. Samuel continued to be the protective, devoted husband he had always been. On their 5th wedding anniversary, he gave Olivia a necklace he had carved from mountain jade, a delicate piece that nestled at her throat. On their 10th anniversary, he presented her with a leather-bound journal filled with love letters he had written over the years but never given her, wanting to save them all for this moment. Olivia gave him her own gifts, too. She sewed him a new coat lined with fur for harsh winter days. She painted a picture of their cabin and family that he hung above the fireplace with pride. But more than physical gifts, she gave him something he had not had since before the war: peace. The nightmares that had plagued him for years grew less frequent and finally stopped altogether. The guilt he had carried about his lost unit faded as he found new purpose in his family. She had healed him just as he had healed her. When Thomas was 12 and Rose was 9, they welcomed another child, a surprise pregnancy that both delighted and slightly overwhelmed them. This baby, another boy they named David Michael Pierce, arrived with a lusty cry and an appetite that kept Olivia busy. Thomas and Rose were fascinated by their baby brother, both of them eager to help care for him. The cabin that had once held just Samuel in solitary isolation now rang with children's laughter, with conversations around the dinner table, with the sounds of family life in all its messy glory. And every evening, after the children were in bed, Samuel and Olivia would sit together on their porch, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Did you ever imagine this?" Samuel asked one such evening, "when you first came to Oatman all those years ago?" "No," Olivia admitted. "I imagined surviving. I imagined existing. I never let myself imagine actually living, actually being happy. I thought that was for other people, whole people." "We are whole," Samuel said firmly. "Maybe not in the way we started out, but whole in the ways that matter. We have built something real and beautiful here." "Yes, we have." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and mountain air and the particular smell that was just Samuel. "You saved me, you know. That first day when you walked into the general store and looked at me like I was just a person, not a damaged thing to be pitied. You gave me back my life. You saved me too. You made me believe I deserved happiness after everything I had done and seen. You taught me that love was not something I had to earn, but something I could simply receive and give." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the mountains darken against the sky. Behind them, in the cabin, their children slept safe and warm. Around them, the wilderness stretched out in all its wild beauty. And between them, love flowed steady and sure, the kind of love that had been forged in pain and emerged stronger for it. Years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a young man much like his father, tall and strong with a protective streak and a kind heart. He eventually married a girl from Oatman named Mary Sullivan, a spirited young woman who fit into the Pierce family like she had always belonged. They built a cabin not far from Samuel and Olivia's, starting their own life in the mountains. Rose surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a doctor. She had inherited her mother's determination and her father's steady hands, and at 16 she left for Denver to attend medical school. It was hard for Samuel and Olivia to see their daughter go, but they were enormously proud of her ambition and courage. She wrote letters frequently, telling them about her studies and the new world she was discovering. David grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and art. He spent hours drawing the mountains and wildlife around their home, his sketches showing real talent. Samuel built him a small studio attached to the cabin where he could work without disturbing the household. Eleanor lived to see all her great-nieces and nephews grow, delighting in the family that had sprung from the unlikely union of a scarred woman and a mountain man. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at age 78, the whole town mourned, but none more than Olivia, who had lost not just an aunt, but the woman who had given her a second chance at life. Samuel held Olivia through her grief, just as she had held him through his own sorrows over the years. They buried Eleanor in the small cemetery outside Oatman, and Olivia planted roses on her grave that would bloom every spring. As Samuel and Olivia themselves grew older, their love remained constant. Gray threads appeared in their hair, and lines deepened around their eyes. Samuel's powerful frame remained strong but moved a bit slower. Olivia's scarred hand developed arthritis that made some tasks harder. But these physical changes did not diminish what they had built together. They became grandparents when Thomas and Mary had twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Eleanor after their grandparents. Samuel, the grandfather now, wept openly when he held his namesake, overcome by the beautiful symmetry of life continuing through generations. Rose eventually returned from Denver as Dr. Rose Pierce, setting up practice in Oatman and the surrounding areas. She remained unmarried, declaring she was married to her work, and her parents supported her choice. She visited the mountain cabin frequently, often bringing medical supplies and checking on her aging parents. David surprised everyone by falling in love with a visiting artist from San Francisco, a young man named James who saw the world the same way David did. When David nervously introduced James to his parents, afraid of their reaction, Samuel simply embraced them both and said, "Love is love. All that matters is that you have found happiness." Olivia agreed wholeheartedly, welcoming James into the family with open arms. They built a small house in Oatman where David ran an art studio and James taught painting lessons. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Olivia renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends. Samuel's long hair was now more gray than brown, and Olivia's scars had softened with age, but when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had met in a general store all those years ago. "Olivia Pierce," Samuel said as they stood before the same Reverend Matthews, now himself quite elderly. 30 years ago I promised to love you forever. That turned out to be the easiest promise I ever made. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I would choose you again and again in every lifetime." "Samuel Pierce," Olivia replied, tears streaming down her face, "you taught me that brokenness is not the end but rather a beginning. You showed me that scars are just proof we survived, that damage does not mean unlovable. You gave me a life more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. My forever is not long enough to love you, but I will spend every moment trying." They kissed as the church erupted in applause, and when they left together, walking down the aisle hand in hand, everyone present understood they were witnessing something rare and precious. True love, tested by time and hardship, emerged not just intact but stronger. Samuel and Olivia Pierce lived many more years in their mountain cabin. They watched their grandchildren grow and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren. They continued their rhythms of gardening and reading and sitting on their porch watching sunsets. They made love with the comfortable passion of long-married couples who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. They argued occasionally, usually about small things, and always made up before sleep. When Samuel eventually passed at the age of 79, it was peacefully in his sleep with Olivia beside him. their hands clasped together as they had been for 45 years of marriage. The grief nearly broke her, but she survived it the way she had survived everything else, with strength and grace. She continued living in the mountain cabin, surrounded by children and grandchildren who visited constantly, unwilling to let her be alone. Olivia Pierce lived to be 83 years old. On her last day, surrounded by 3 generations of family in the cabin Samuel had built with his own hands, she looked around at all the love and life that had sprung from 2 broken people choosing each other. She thought about the whispers that had followed her to Oatman, the people who said she was too damaged to be loved. She thought about Samuel's words that first Sunday on the mountain, "Broken things fit together best." He had been right. Their brokenness had not been an obstacle to love, but rather the foundation for it. They had understood each other in ways whole, unmarked people never could. They had taken their individual pain and transformed it into something beautiful. As her eyes closed for the last time, surrounded by love and legacy, Olivia's last conscious thought was a simple one: gratitude. Gratitude for scars that led her to Samuel, gratitude for a mountain that became home, gratitude for a love that proved everyone wrong. Rose, now Dr. Pierce, with gray streaking her dark hair, held her mother's hand as she passed, and she knew that her parents were together again, wherever souls went when they left their earthly bodies. The broken mountain man and the scarred woman had found their forever, and they had built something that would last long beyond their own lives. The cabin in the mountains remained in the Pierce family for generations, a testament to the love that had been born there. Grandchildren brought their own children to see where great-great-grandparents Samuel and Olivia had built their life together. The story of their love became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that what the world saw as broken could actually be beautiful, that scars were not reasons to hide but marks of courage, that love could flourish in the most unexpected places between the most unlikely people. They had proven that broken things really do fit together best, creating something whole and perfect from their imperfect pieces. And that legacy of love, born in an Arizona Territory general store in 1878 and nurtured in the mountains for decades, would live on forever in the hearts of those who came after, a beacon of hope that true love, the kind that sees past surfaces to souls, never truly dies. The mountain still stood, eternal and beautiful, holding the memories of 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that transcended time, tragedy, and the small-minded judgments of those who could not see that damage did not mean unworthy, that scars did not diminish worth, that love, real love, sees everything and chooses to stay anyway. That was the greatest legacy of Samuel and Olivia Pierce, not just the children and grandchildren they left behind, but the proof that love conquers all, even the deepest wounds, even the most broken hearts, especially when 2 broken hearts choose to beat as one.